Super, ready. Hi, welcome to the Next Normal show today with a very special guest on the topic last mile delivery. I put in the headline, will drone delivery be the standard in 5 years? Well, there's nobody better to talk to on this matter than Roland Siegwart, the expert of ETH of Zurich, renowned specialist in that field, lots of books, publications, and I'm a big fan. I'm really happy to have him on the show today. And we already said before we have to stop ourselves probably after 30 minutes because this conversation can really go on much longer. And I'm very much looking forward to our discussions and the insights from Roland. So Roland, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah. So to jump right in, I put also in the show notes on LinkedIn, I put on a study from Capgemini of 2019, where they they put up numbers of costs of last mile delivery and also view what happened after or what happened due to COVID in the pandemic, that people are now much more open to get home delivery. Where do you see on a technical side the topic drone delivery? Is that already applicable? I mean, we heard about that the last few years. Is that already there?
Yes, I think in principle the technology is ready. Speed on the ground or actually with drones to go from, for example, a warehouse to a place, private place. But of course, the interface at the private place might be a critical issue because you need, if it's drones, you need landing spots to deliver and then put the parcels or whatever you're delivering, or somebody has to take it over. It's the same for robots on the ground. So I think we have probably to adapt our infrastructure, like the mailbox, which in the future will probably be a little bit more sophisticated so that the delivery robots can actually really put something in the mailbox, or otherwise you have to always be at home. You have to pick it up at a certain locations next to your home, and this is probably not what you want. You would like to have the food, for example, delivered more or less directly in your kitchen. And this is still not the last mile, it's probably the last 5 meters, which make a difference how to hand the whole thing over.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting topic, putting the let's say the focus on the doorstep, because something that I found out, which is happening now more and more with DHL in Germany, is that you get photos of your delivery and they really just put it in front of your door. And so you come home and or you don't hear the ring because you're home anyway due to lockdown, but then you come outside and there are 5 new parcels outside your door, which would have been unbelievable before the pandemic, but might be something we are more willing to accept after the pandemic or now at the current stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I personally also accept this, and I'm happy if I don't have to be at home if somebody is delivering something at home. And of course, the risk is there that somebody can steal it, but it's probably a reasonable balance between sometimes something which is lost, but if it's a small number, it's probably not so critical. I think it's the same in retail. You assume that some products are stolen, and you just calculate this in your whole business model. But of course, if it's a multi-story building, then there is still this last probably 50 meters in height or whatever, which have to be solved. Either the robots will go into the elevator and actually go to the doorbell, in front of the door of the apartment, or you have to find another solution. In principle, also, this is technical solvable. So new elevators have a direct access so that you could actually directly control also from a robot, but there is still some elements to be solved. It's not rocket science, but it has to be implemented, and it will be done as soon as the market is big enough.
And do you think, what is the critical piece now, just to food for thoughts, when we talk about autonomous vehicles in general, looking to China, where you have every few meters a 5G antenna placed nowadays, if we look at Shenzhen, and to us here without this like very condensed 5G network. Is 5G a technology that is needed for autonomous delivery, or what is the big stepping stone in that sense?
Of course, 5G or fast communication networks really help a lot, but I don't think that it's needed. My view is still that an autonomous vehicle, a robot, has to be fully autonomous without communication. It has to be safe without any communication, because you never can guarantee that the communication is on. I think we all experience this from time to time. If the network is overloaded at the train station, even if you have in principle good connection there and an antenna next by, you don't have any throughput. So I think it's helpful. It's somewhat needed, because then your communication also with the persons receiving the parcel is guaranteed or faster and so on. But for the navigation itself, it's not needed, and it's feasible without a very fast network, because it's not teleoperation. So the whole control navigation is running on the robot itself and not in the cloud. And I think it's important that it's like this.
And that's an interesting point. So that would mean that also, if it's a car or if it's a drone, that the intelligence has to be, at least to that sense, within the, let's say, delivery vehicle, to be, as you said, completely autonomous and not to rely on an internet connection in that sense. And does that also apply to drones? Because, I mean, drones take a lot of, I mean, cars as well, but you have more space, but drones are usually smaller. You think about a package book delivery from Amazon with a lot of weight. How does that work, putting in the processing power and not trying to go that small?
Yes, of course, with drone, the situation is a little bit different. And that's probably also the reason why drones has had probably the fastest progress in the last 10 years. We see drones everywhere, also in private use for taking pictures from the air. Because drones are typically in the free space, and so there is no risk to collide with something else, apart probably with another drone. So it's much easier. As long as you have a good GPS coverage, which you have in the air, you can actually fly from A to B very precisely without having additional sensors. But again, with the drones at the landing spot or at the place where you have to hand over the parcel, there it's getting critical, because GPS might fail. There is reflections on buildings. So you have to have then, for the landing procedure, some additional sensors, cameras, for example, and the algorithms which allow you to really precisely land in front of the door or at a specific place. So in general, drones are much simpler, because a ground robot has actually to navigate and understand the local situation on its whole the entire trajectory. Because it goes through a city, for example, it has to know where the sidewalk is, where the street is, where the passage over the street is. This is not an issue for the drones. Of course, if you would have then millions or thousands of drones delivering packages, there we will have another issue, because then drones have to be coordinated in the air, which is also not so easy. So the drones would have to probably see each other. You can do this in a centralized way, but then again, you have the issue that you need a very reliable communication, which is risky.
Yeah, and coming down to the cost side, so you have on one hand logistics companies. And I have one logistics company in my backside, who is eager to do last mile on storage or delivery and is testing also autonomous vehicles. So there are a lot of logistics company looking into that. And on the other hand, there are retailers with a lot of physical stores, which hold inventory, a lot of physical stores which are close to certain neighborhoods and which could function as a kind of a hub system. Are there already tests in that sense? Do you see something like that happening, that physical stores can become a kind of a delivery last mile hub?
I think there is a couple of projects. I don't know of any project which has really this deployed in large scale, but we are ourselves involved in a vision where we have a prototype which will hopefully by the end of this year demonstrate that you could exactly have this delivery at the airport of Zurich, where you have actually a flagship store, a small one, in the area of the airport after the whole security check, but you have a bigger store and the whole warehouse outside this building. And the idea is there that you can actually either order, if you are waiting for the airplane, directly online, and then a robot will deliver you some products, or you go into the flagship store, which has probably only one example to show of a certain product, and then if you order it or you buy it, then it will automatically be delivered at the gate, for example. And I think this is concept which will probably change. I could imagine that we will have in the future much more these somewhat small stores which don't have all the articles directly there, but they will be delivered. You can imagine, I could also imagine, even for food, if you have a family with a lot of kids, this you actually carrying a lot of food around, especially if you think also about drinks and so on. Imagine that you just go to the store and you scan, and then actually you just go home, and in the same time the whole stuff is delivered at your front door. So you don't have to put it in your car. You can go with the bicycle to do big shopping. And I think in at least dense areas like in cities where people anyway don't have often cars, this concept could probably change. So on the other side, I think this type of stores might be interesting because people still like to see the products. If you want to buy fruits, you would like to see the fruit yourself and see, is this really the type of fruit and whatever I want. And so people, I think, like to go to stores and see stuff, but probably people less and less like to carry it home, especially if they have to do this by walking or by bicycle. And so there will be a mixture. And some products you know exactly this is the product I want. You can just order, but some products you probably want to see, and then you get inspiration and you want to buy it, and it will be anyway delivered.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. That's also coming back to the cost side, because last week Paul Milzer was on the show, and we took the example from China, from the Hema supermarkets with the Daigos, the personal shoppers, and he said, hey, that concept's already adapted by Whole Foods in New York, where you have not a real customers in the store, but actually personal shoppers who do photos on WhatsApp, what they're picking for you, and do you want this watermelon or that, and then they bring it to your home. And again, those are jobs generated, but it's a cost. And for sure, those are the things that companies will look at, especially at a larger scale, how that can be handled. But is it currently already in a factor to say human worker in that sense, in the equivalent to the investment and the running costs of such a system? Is that already in an equilibrium?
I think probably not today, because there is still a lot of investment to be taken to develop this to really reliable products. A lot of this technology is in principle available and shown that it's feasible. But typically you say that from the inspiration, which is somewhat what universities often do as research, there is 10%, and then you have another 90% to make it an industrial, proven, reliable product. And this investment has still to be done. And before this is done, it's very difficult to use it because nobody can offer this at a low price. So it has to scale, and the scaling is not so easy. I think it's will take quite some time, and it has to be really applied to very specific tasks, because what robots are still extremely bad and will continue to be bad in the next, I would guess, in the next 10 to 20 years, is that they are not flexible enough. So humans actually can easily get in touch with, for example, the customer which wants to select the watermelon, and if there is something wrong, and then says, yes, I want to see the watermelon which is below, we can easily handle this. Robots have still a lot of problems. They are very precise in some tasks, like industrial robots. They can actually precisely weld stuff, much more precise than humans. But as soon as there is something unforeseen, you have to improvise. And humans are extremely good in this. And it will continue that robots will probably be less good with this. The same with autonomous cars. That I think today we are somewhat on a level that autonomous cars on the freeway are probably driving safer than humans. At least we are close to this. But in situations where it's a weird situation, where probably there is a lot of people on the street in the city, very narrow area in Europe, whatever, there you have to improvise. You have to understand science. You have to give science to the pedestrians. All this is extremely difficult. There humans have a huge advantage, and this is actually often the hindering point, that the robots cannot solve everything. So we have to find the right segments where the robots can really 100% reliably do the job every day.
Yeah, and taking that a step into the growth area, you already mentioned that in our background, not my background, but the whole background where we are meeting in this broadcast room, that's a Microlino 24/7 store, autonomous Microlino 24/7. We see a lot of those developments, small stores by Coop, the Avec box. We see it with Tegut in Germany. We see the Edeka stores popping up now, doing 24/7 autonomous stores with a very small inventory, very small stock. So the big hurdle there is, yes, of course, security and how to do the payment and how to let people in, but replenishment is a large issue there. And when I saw that picture here, that could be a retail box, and then you could deliver autonomously things from the air. And you also mentioned that there could be something like the example of the Zurich airport, where you have a flagship store or a logistics hub, and then you have those 24/7 stores with a delivery. Is that something you already see, or that you have knowledge of? I know you already know or have a solution with Mercedes for small stores or independent vendors, so that could be an interesting example.
Yeah, so I think this delivery with drones, where Amazon once pushed the idea, and interestingly, one of my students, which has now a startup company, came with the same ideas even earlier. I think this delivery with drones will become an important business, but B2B and not B2C. And the reason for this is that if you would start to deliver all the packages from Amazon with drones, you will have an overload of the airspace, you will have a permanent noise, and you will have also in total, because there are so many drones in the air, also an additional risk that people can even get killed, even if there are small drones, if they follow the head of a person. And I'm pretty convinced that in most dense populated areas, people will not accept this. Because you of course, you have probably seen these small drones. They actually are not so noisy if they're not really directly next to us. But as soon as you load them, because they are carrying products, then the noise level goes up and goes drastically up. So even small drones are not so quiet as you imagine as soon as you have load on it. So I think most of this delivery has to be on the ground. We have on the ground enough. We have the streets, we have the sidewalks. I think this can be delivered by somewhat autonomous cars and autonomous delivery systems. But in the air, there is, of course, for example, Metronet already doing some extended testing for delivering special probes from medical centers from one center to the other, which have to be analyzed, for example. There you fly from the rooftop from one hospital to the next. And this, I think, is something which everybody can understand and everybody is willing to accept if this makes a little bit of noise. But the large volume with Amazon or whatever retailer delivering, this is in a way infeasible, I think. So it will be a selection of fields where it's very interesting, probably also even in remote places. I could imagine that Amazon will not deliver this in cities because there it's too much, too dense, and too if everybody delivers. But if you are living in an alpine hut, I think that is probably the most efficient way to deliver there. And so drones will play an important role in the whole thing. But in densely populated areas, I think it will be ground robots which will do the job.
And I liked what you brought in with the noise, because as a consumer, on a consumer view, we only know those small drones. But having seen some military actions in the past, I know there are pretty big drones out there, and there are drones which could carry several hundred kilos. So this is not a small consumer drone anymore. And of course, that would be the ones, if we think about retail B2B replenishment factors, or even, as you said, Amazon type styles on large volumes, that would be a different beast, because that's something you hear and something you see. And probably in dense populated areas, people would not be very happy that at 3 o'clock or at 2 o'clock at night, there would be a replenishment cycle and you have the noise of a helicopter going by.
Yeah, and even the smaller drones, even if they're only carrying 2 or 3 kilograms, if you want to do this efficient, it will be noisy. We know this from helicopters today, so there is no reason why this new type of helicopters, which might be a little bit different, the bigger ones should be much less noisy. Apart if they are really running in a very inefficient way, you might be able to make it less noisy, but then you are actually, the fuel consumption or power consumption is much higher. So I think there is some limitations, but there is still some very interesting fields where it makes sense. Even for delivery, for example, bigger drones could actually deliver very fast to fill up stocks in certain regions. And in some situations, it might be even more efficient to go in the air. This would be not fully helicopter, it would be hybrid, where you have vertical takeoff and landing, but then you are fixed wing mode. And imagine if you have to go up through the mountains to a little village and go on the street, it might be more efficient to really have a small or a drone which can carry probably a couple of 100 kilograms, which is flying there. And this is still feasible because then it's probably twice a day where you deliver something at a location specific in a small city. That's, I think, acceptable. And it's not hundreds of drones which are delivering to individuals.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. So one thing we talked about in past shows was that in the next normal of retail, the shop formats will change and there will be more specific formats, the one who are fast and convenience, the one to get an experience. And this on the adaption, you also said is, I think, also the clue to how to handle last mile. It's very much based on the location and the specific journey. If you're in a remote location, drone would make sense. If you're in a dense city, maybe a locker or pickup station would make more sense because of congestion of traffic and of limited airspace or high-rise buildings where you cannot do a delivery in that term, at least not now. Once maybe our buildings change and the delivery spot is on top of our buildings for the drones, for the retail deliveries, and everybody's going up there, it might be different. But in many big cities, I think congestion and traffic jams is a natural. So there needs to be other ways. I mean, in China, you have a lot of people on their not bicycles anymore, but on their small scooters speeding through the city. That's noisy as well. That's dangerous. Of course, there could be options with drones in that instance. But you said an important point before was that not relying on the cloud, but having local computing. And is that something also when you look at security, is that a very important security aspect to keep computing local?
It might have an influence on the security. Of course, in principle, you can actually disconnect the whole network, and then you are much more secure. But typically, you probably don't want this because, for example, a drone or also a delivery robot on ground, they typically want to download maps. If they have to go to a new area, they have to download maps. Maps will be stored not only locally for a certain area, but then the global map for the whole city will be centralized and updated by all the robots contributing to it. And so you need a communication, but you could actually download this in the beginning of the trip and then actually cut off the communication. Now, the security elements, I think there will be solutions. I'm not a specialist on this, but I always compare this with banks. Banks are today, most people are doing online banking, and we hear very little that there is an issue. So there must be solutions, and there will be issues, but I think it will be not so catastrophic. So we had these examples of all of a sudden somebody taking over a car, but this is because we didn't learn. We will learn, industry will learn, car manufacturer will learn, and they will be able to protect the cars in a similar quality as banks are protecting their access, and then the risks are pretty small. But of course, with all new technology, the new risks. For example, you could imagine that somebody is actually faking and uploading to the cloud maps which are wrong from the city. And then there might be the next day a disaster with the delivery robot because they are confused, because they download then the updated map, which makes sense to update it because you have probably construction site and so on. But if it's wrongly updated, then you can create a big mess.
Mm. And that's an interesting topic to bring in, because so far, let's say a standard retailer has not have to worry about maps. So that's something completely new on the retail side, whereas a typical logistics company like a DHL or Kühne und Nagel, those people, or a UPS, FedEx, they already are doing maps since some time, because that's one of their primary benefits, to have a very good understanding of where their drivers are going and how to plan their milk runs and do the optimal planning. And that's probably a very new thing for the normal physical retailer.
Yes, absolutely. But I assume that will be actually special service companies who will do this, as the logistics people will actually expand in this direction and offer this logistics they offer today, but just in a simpler way. Of course, the pizza guy who is delivering pizza at home, it's typically today people, but this is quite expensive. And I think robots will make this extremely cheap, the last miles. where this will revolutionize a lot of how people live, and probably you, instead of going to the restaurant, you will rather get the food at your home, because you have a nice home, and you prefer to be in your private space, but you don't want to cook if you have a lot of visitors or guests, and then the delivery robot will deliver it. And the interesting part is it's the same as autonomous car. There will be a massive shift. Imagine to most cars today, they are driving probably 2 hours a day or even less, and otherwise they're sticking around. Imagine you would have only autonomous car and people would not have their own car anymore. We could actually optimize that most cars are running the whole day, so you need less cars. And so this is getting cheaper, because if you drive more miles per year and replace then the cars probably faster, and the mile per kilometer, or the cost per mile is much lower, and then you don't have the driver. So it's really a huge difference, I think, at one point, if everything is established. But it's still a long way to get there, because at the beginning you probably need then for extra infrastructure, and you have to do this and install this, and this is extra cost, which will probably not make it very, very interesting as a business model in the starting phase.
And that's a very interesting point, putting in the times, because when you look at retail, and let's look at restaurants, but also normal shopping, grocery shopping, you have peak times. I mean, everybody wants to have their food at 12 o'clock, and they want to have their dinner at 6 o'clock. So there are some infrastructure constraints on peaks, and that's a part that we very often see with applications that we cater to in the self-service area, that very often you need to cater to the maximum amount in these peak hours, otherwise it will not help you. If somebody sees a queue in front of a restaurant at 12 o'clock, he will not get into the queue to order. He wants to be quicker because he only has half an hour of lunch break. And that's probably one of the very interesting parts on the delivery side, how then to optimize that and maybe pack things together, do intelligent milk runs in order to really handle that peak volume on those actions.
But I think there is probably also a change in society, and probably it's even accelerated and impacted even with Corona. Because interestingly, I see meanwhile that I have a lot of meeting at 12. Before Corona, it was typically, this is lunchtime, 12 to 1, we have no meetings. So obviously people are not so strict about when exactly they eat. And I think there might be plenty of new concepts, which, for example, they did also in some ski resorts, where you could pay extra, then you could have faster line, or you pay less at the time. And they will do this for the trains, and they will do this, I think, probably also with the food, because then you will say, okay, you can actually have your food warm at home at 12 for 20 euros. And if you are willing to do it at 1 or at 1:30, it's 3 euros less expensive. And I think there you could actually offer much more flexibility.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. We even have adopted our lunch or meal due to the availability of the restaurant or the delivery of the restaurant, which our kids love. So they said, we want to eat from this restaurant, so that the restaurant only delivers at 4 o'clock. Okay, then we have lunch at 4.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's adoption. I think like many of the points you brought up today, putting your parcels in front of the door, adapting lunch breaks, being more flexible on your working time, doing a show completely virtual, not meeting in person. That's probably something that changed the society and probably will sustain as a change.
Yes, I think there is plenty of new elements, and I think all of us experienced this with Corona. I personally also, of course, all of a sudden you're also shopping. Typically, you had to go shopping when the shops had opening hours. But now I can shop at 11 o'clock in the evening because it's online anyway. And I think people will adapt, and I think there is a lot of changes also ahead of us. And we can optimize also the usage of infrastructure. So in Switzerland, we are also thinking about the train system is overloaded at the peak times, but there is no reason why should a university not, instead of starting at 8 o'clock with lectures, they could actually start at 10 and go a little bit later in the evening. Young people anyway are a little bit late. And and then they can even get cheaper tickets. So I think there is more flexibility because we have also the tools. Everything which is online, all the networking, all the usage of smartphone allow us also to be more flexible.
Yeah. And on flexibility, maybe we already over the time. One of the things that we are eyeing very curiously is seeing investment of large retail and hospitality companies. And one of the things that we're watching closely is as McDonald's is putting a great effort in place to do own delivery services. Like you said, a lot of specialized delivery companies have sprung up. Some even went to the stock exchange. I mean, one went, the second one went now in Europe. And now you have these large retailers who deliberately say they want to do it themselves. So it will be very interesting what exactly they will do. Will they copy just this low labor market, or will they really go into smart, intelligent digital solutions?
Yeah, so I think the one element is that robotics is extremely complex technology, and we will see how this evolves. If you see most big IT companies like Google, Facebook, Apple, but also Amazon, they invested in robotics technology. They have their own program, but they also bought some startups. Some of them actually gave up again and sold the startups again because it's another business. And I would assume that also with McDonald's, probably they will find a solution that they do this in the partnership. Because if they want to build it up themselves, it's very painful, and they don't have this culture and don't have the people to do this. They should, at least I would propose them to do this in partnership, because then you have a partner which can actually develop the system not only for McDonald's, for a lot of more, and you're much faster in having a reliable system. But we will see how, and I'm happy to see and to hear that McDonald's is moving in this direction, because this will be help really to push technology in robotics, because it's getting ready. And in some fields, for me, for example, McDonald's is probably a perfect case, because I don't like the McDonald's restaurants inside, but sometimes I like a McDonald's a burger, but I would prefer to eat it at home. And I would probably be much more often client if I can get it at home.
And get it at home warm and in a good quality and at a certain speed, because I mean, eating McDonald's is an impulse. It's something of it's not something you deliberately plan weeks ahead.
Yeah.
It's more of an impulse buy or an impulse doing. No, but that's fantastic. Thank you very much. We had no questions today. Maybe we overwhelmed the our audience. Let's see. But thank you very much for participating, for spending your time, and I'm very much looking forward to meet each other in person again. And thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much. From my side, I'm happy. I was very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward together that what the future will bring us. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.